Okay, so I just want to talk about the three codes of rail on River Road here and give you a little summary on why I chose to do it the way I did. And what I want to do is just point out the three rail codes, like code 70, code 55, code 40. And then I'm going to show you how I did this transition from code 70 to 50 to 40, because further down here, I can just point out this actual turnout is code 70 rail, and then this one is code 55. Did I say code 50 again? Anyway, code 55 turnout, code 70 rail, code 70 turnout, code 55 rail, code 40, and code 55, right? So how do I make this transition here? I'll talk about that, but I just want to point out a couple of things first. So this is pretty much the standard main. You can see the spacing of the ties and so on. Microengineering is pretty good if you're into North American rail. And code 70 I prefer over code 83 because it's almost as tall as code 83. Actually, it's hard to tell the difference unless you look close. But I really like the rail head on code 70. It's more scale. It has a more scale look to it, like if you compare the two. I don't have a piece of code 83 with me right now to show you, but I do have, or I laid all of Glover Road in code 83 because that's all I had at the time, but obviously River Road was planned differently. So I'm happy with that. When that's ballasted and painted, it should look pretty good. Now this is code 50 on styrene ties, as I mentioned before. So this is, or code, here I go again, code 55, code 55. Anyway. Code 55 is actually quite nice. You can spike the inside and the outside of the rail, no problem with most flanges. I mean, they have to be really old, cheesy wheel sets if they're going to go bumpity bump down the track with micro spikes. But anyway, I really like this. Like, this rail is really nice. Back in the day, I would have hand laid everything, but I don't want to do that this time around. My back's not as good, and I don't have the fortitude to do that anymore. But I still like to hand lay some. And in this case, this is code 40 on balsa wood ties. Now, somebody had mentioned, and I agree with them, that, are you going to lower the, the road bed here down lower so that this siding drops down? Well, I did think of that, but I don't really want to cut into this 1/4-inch cork here, because I want to use this to carve into rather than carve into the plywood, because there's a fascia here and I want to create a nice transition here, and I want as much thickness to play with here as I can, and I don't want to sink this track too much because it's only a short run, okay? So if the drop in the track elevation is too severe on a short run, it doesn't look right. It doesn't model well. Okay, like if this was a longer run, then yeah, I would. But rather than do that, though, what I did was I sanded the ties down. You can see there is an elevation change here. You can see, even though this is the same surface here. But visually, when it's painted and weathered and grass growing in and all out of here and stuff, like, you'll see the distinctions of the three rails. And these balsa ties, which I sanded down with a board sander. Remember how I talked about sanding sticks, how handy they are? So I sanded them down, basically, and was able to, like, the track starts to drop down. Actually, the track starts to drop down from the code 70 a little bit, down to the 55 here, and then down to the 40. So there is a slight descent, and it's smooth, and it looks good. Like, when you see the train run on it coming up, you'll see what I mean by that. And furthermore, these styrene ties, even though they're more work, and I only spiked every 5th tie, that's all you really need to do. Like, this isn't Proto 87, so I don't care about that. So I don't want to go there. So this is really solid. Like, this is more solid track, or outlast this commercial track. In fact, all the hand laid track I did mostly in O and narrow gauge and standard gauge back in the day always outlasted commercial track. It's just built, it's more solid, right? Like, when you build at scale like this, when you actually build ties, well, mostly basswood and spiked rail, and you can fix it and repair it easier too. But this is super solid. Like, styrene ties are even more solid than any wood, except you got to pre-drill the hole a bit. So, but you know, it went pretty quick, and I'm going to do a long run with this code 55 all the way down to module C as well when I get down to that part of it. Okay, so right now then, this is really good. It runs really good. Now this code 40, like I'm going to show you, and why I like this method is because you can lower the profile of these ties easy with the sanding block. You can also scribe and split them even easier and more kind of scale-like than basswood. Like it just distresses much easier. And if you want to harden these ties because it's soft balsa, you just wick in a bit of thin CA, which I'll show you what I do as well. Well, I think I pointed that out at the beginning where you put a spike in and a drop of thin CA and it's just rock solid. I mean, it's not going anywhere, man. It's not even ballasted either. And then furthermore, there's no micro spikes on the inside of the code 40. If you do that, some of your wheel sets will go bumpity bump. But I didn't put any on this section, so it runs really nice actually. You'll see, okay, coming up. But before that, let me just show you how I do this transition because people have asked about it. And I just sent up a kind of a quick shoot from the hip drawing in the community tab, but I did a little video on it today, and I want to show you that first, and then we'll do some test runs to close out, okay? Okay, so I just want to show you this code 70 to 55 to 40 rail joinery, okay? So as you can see here on the left, code 70. In this case, unweathered rail, and then this is weathered code 55, and this was a piece of weathered code 40. So you can see the top is flush, see? Notice the rail joiners. The rail joiners are code 70 by Micro Engineering, okay? Now what I've done is I've installed the rail joiner on the code 70, then crushed this end and then filed it down so the top of the code 55 lines up with the 70 on this side, and then I do the same thing with the same code 70 rail joiner. If you squeeze them a bit, they fit tight on code 55. If you just squeeze them down with a pair of flat pliers like this, right? Alright, and then the code 40 sits on top and gets soldered, and then you can see, like, see the end here? See, there's the code 70 rail joiner on code 70, and then I crushed it down, see? And then I file it to tweak it nice, just file it, because you'll have two layers of it, and if it's got solder in it as well, that's okay, it'll just fill that. I dip that in flux, and then when this is prepped and ready, this is code 40 on the right. This is code, or no, sorry, this is code 55. This is code 70. And it just sits on top like that, and you solder it. You weight it down on your bench on a piece of plywood like this. Okay, weight it down, and then just put a soldering iron tip on there and flood some solder into there on the outside of the rail. You don't have to worry about the inside because it'll flood in underneath in the gap there, and it'll fill into that gap. If you put soldering paste, it'll suck all in there and give you a nice weld. Okay, so I'll just show you on the drawing here. Okay, so here's code 70 right here, code 70. This middle section is code 55, and this is code 40 over here. Okay, let me just zoom out a bit, hold on. So you can see that's how I did it. Now there's many ways to do this. You can actually, from Micro Engineering ME, you can get plastic insulated ones, and then if you run droppers from each rail, you'll always have power to those sections. Or you can just solder them both together, and if it's a shorter run, or depending the style you want to do, and you'll always have power to the rail, right? So yeah, so these are code 70 rail joiners on both situations where I have 3 codes of rail that are flush along the top. You can touch this up with a file a little bit here too if you want, and then just polish it down. And you basically get a nice multiple code rail joinery happening there, and it's a smooth transition. And what you apply in substrate or tiles underneath is up to you. Okay, so as you can see, this train, this is just a Walther's Jeep 9. You know, they're not the best wheel sets, you know, like, I mean, they're good locomotive. I really like this little guy, but not as nice as maybe running as my Atlas, um, or even the Kato I have, but, you know, it runs flawlessly. Like, this is code 40 track. Like, I didn't put spikes on the inside. I didn't spike the inside of the rail. Let's make sure I'm in focus there for you. I didn't spike the inside of the rail on the code 40, but I bet you I could do it with the micro spikes and still get away with it, because I have a few down on the end here, and you know, you can't feel them. So, all right. Up the hill, right? I've never had a problem with the turnouts. Every turnout I've built from Fast Tracks has been silky smooth. Just never had a problem, even when the frogs aren't fully perfect. They just run through glassy smooth. You won't have problems if you stick to the plan. That's code 55, and I'll tell you right now, with code 55 is completely like doable, easy with standard HO. Like I even wished in a way that I did now all my rail in code 55 because yeah, there's the accuracy factor, but I think in terms of the visual on how this looks over code 70 and even code 40, you know, which is I think totally cool for sidings like this, like low volume, low traffic siding. You know, you have the the code 70, 55, 40. I think it's a really good look for an HO scale shelf layout. You know, I think it just works out like this transition here of track when it's ballasted and painted and so on, and trains running equally well on all of it is, you know, very pleasing. You know, like I'm really pleased with how that's turned out. You know, I'm glad I did this, and I like the look of the sunken ties too. You know, with this rail, like even though this is like would be considered 40-pound rail, I still think like visually, like artistically, it looks right to me. Even though someone would say, "Oh, they never ran 40-pound rail in Canada." Well, I challenge that actually. But in terms of ratio and smaller scale, like below O, I mean, I think it looks fantastic. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. We'll see you soon on the next vlog.